Welcome to the Haunted Lore podcast, where we explore the darkest corners of history and the supernatural phenomena that linger in forgotten places. Today, we journey to Romania's capital city to uncover the chilling story of one of Eastern Europe's most infamous haunted houses. On a seemingly ordinary street in Bucharest stands a mansion with a facade completely shrouded in ivy, nature itself attempting to conceal the horrors that occurred within its walls. This is Casa Diavolului, the House of the Devil, a place where tragedy and evil have become so deeply intertwined that the boundary between historical fact and supernatural legend has blurred beyond recognition. As we peel back the layers of this sinister location's past, I must warn our more sensitive listeners. The story we're about to explore contains descriptions of violence and death. The House of the Devil earned its name not through superstition alone, but through the very real blood that was spilled within its walls. Bucharest, often called Little Paris for its elegant architecture and vibrant cultural scene, has a hidden side that tourists rarely glimpse. Behind the grand boulevards and ornate palaces lies a network of older streets that tell darker tales of the city's past. General Prapogescu Street is located in a historic district, where buildings from the 19th and early 20th centuries stand as silent witnesses to Romania's turbulent history. Among these structures, one building stands out, not for its beauty, but for the palpable sense of dread it evokes in passers-by. The House of the Devil is instantly recognizable by its most distinctive feature, a thick carpet of ivy that engulfs almost the entire facade. While ivy-covered buildings are often considered charming or picturesque, there is something distinctly unsettling about this particular growth. The tangled vines seem almost predatory, as if the plant is not merely covering the building but consuming it, or perhaps, as some locals suggest, restraining whatever malevolence dwells within. The mansion was constructed in the late 19th century during a period when Bucharest was undergoing rapid modernization. Originally built as a residence for a wealthy merchant family, its architecture combined neo-classical elements with traditional Romanian influences. With high ceilings, ornate moldings, and spacious rooms, it once represented the height of luxury and refinement. However, the original owners didn't remain in the house for long. A series of financial misfortunes forced them to sell the property, beginning a cycle of brief occupancies that would become a pattern throughout the building's history. It seemed that no one could live in the house for an extended period without experiencing misfortune of some kind. By the early 20th century, the house had changed hands several times. Each new owner made modifications to the interior, inadvertently creating a labyrinthine quality that would later contribute to its sinister reputation. Corridors that led nowhere, stairways that seemed to descend deeper than the foundation should allow, and rooms that felt inexplicably cold regardless of the season, all became defining characteristics of the increasingly notorious mansion. As Romania entered the turbulent interwar period, a time of political uncertainty and social upheaval, the house on General Prapogescu Street was about to earn its diabolic moniker through a series of events so shocking that they would permanently stain the collective memory of the neighborhood. The events that transformed an already troubled house into Casa Diavolului occurred during the 1930s, as Europe teetered on the edge of another devastating conflict. Romania was experiencing political instability, with fascist movements gaining power and social tensions reaching a breaking point. It was against this backdrop of growing darkness that the house would earn its reputation as a portal for evil. In 1934, a wealthy businessman, whose name has been deliberately obscured in many historical accounts, moved into the mansion with his wife and her sister. Neighbors described the man as reclusive and ill-tempered, often heard shouting at all hours of the night. The two women were rarely seen outside the house, and when they did appear, they seemed subdued and fearful. What happened behind those ivy-covered walls remained hidden until a delivery boy, concerned by the unusual silence and foul odor emanating from the property, alerted authorities. What police discovered inside would shock even the most hardened officers. In the main drawing room, the bodies of both women were found brutally murdered. The scene was described as ritualistic in police reports, with strange symbols drawn on the floor in the victim's blood. The businessman was found in his study, having written a rambling confession that spoke of voices from the walls that had commanded him to commit the horrific acts. Most disturbing of all were his final written words. "This house wanted their blood. It has always been hungry. It will never be satisfied." The murders made headlines across Romania, and for a time, the house stood empty, a grim reminder of the tragedy. However, despite its macabre history, the value of real estate in central Bucharest meant that the property wouldn't remain vacant for long. In 1936, just 2 years after the murders, a wealthy widow purchased the house at a fraction of its market value, dismissing the superstitious whispers as peasant folklore unworthy of a modern, educated woman. Her name was Elena Lupescu, and she was known for her interest in spiritualism and the occult, perhaps explaining her willingness to move into a house with such a dark history. Elena spent lavishly on renovations, stripping away the old wallpaper, replacing fixtures, and bringing in priests to bless each room. For a few months, it seemed that her efforts to cleanse the house had been successful. She hosted small gatherings for fellow spiritualists and was reported to be writing a book about overcoming the negative energies of spaces with troubled pasts. But the triumph was short-lived. Servants began to quit without explanation. Visitors reported feeling watched by unseen eyes. Elena herself began to appear increasingly distressed, telling confidants that she could hear weeping in empty rooms and footsteps pacing the floors above her at night. In the winter of 1937, Elena Lupescu was found hanging from the grand chandelier in the main hall. The official ruling was suicide, but her personal diary, discovered later, painted a more complex and terrifying picture. In her final entry, written just hours before her death, she wrote, "It was never the house that was evil. It is what resides beneath it, what was here long before the first stone was laid. God forgive me for my arrogance in thinking I could silence it." With this third death, the house's sinister reputation was cemented. Locals no longer referred to it by its address, but simply as Casa Diavolului, the House of the Devil. In the decades that followed these tragedies, the House of the Devil stood largely abandoned. Various owners would purchase the property, drawn by its architectural value and prime location, only to leave within months, often without explanation. During World War II, even German officers who requisitioned the house as a temporary headquarters reportedly refused to stay overnight, preferring to return to their barracks after dark. As Romania fell under communist rule following the war, the house was nationalized and briefly converted into administrative offices. Workers assigned to the building frequently requested transfers, complaining of inexplicable equipment failures, mysterious drafts, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. By the 1960s, even the pragmatic communist authorities had abandoned the site, leaving it to deteriorate behind its ever-thickening veil of ivy. It was during this period of abandonment that the supernatural legends surrounding Casa Diavolului began to flourish. Locals reported strange phenomena that transformed the house from merely a site of historical tragedies into something far more sinister in the public imagination. Perhaps the most widely reported phenomenon is the overwhelming sense of malevolence that seems to radiate from the building. People walking past the house describe feelings of sudden dread, inexplicable anger, or profound sadness that dissipate as soon as they move beyond its vicinity. Psychics and sensitives who have investigated the property claim that the house doesn't merely contain a ghostly presence, but serves as a dwelling place for something far more ancient and malevolent. One of the most specific recurring phenomena is said to occur on nights with a full moon. According to numerous witnesses, the number 666, widely recognized as a symbol associated with the devil in Christian tradition, appears on one of the exterior walls. Skeptics have suggested that this is merely a trick of light and shadow cast by the moonlight through the ivy leaves, yet those who claim to have seen it insist that the numbers appear with a precision that cannot be explained by natural causes. Other reported phenomena include the sound of screams or sobbing heard emanating from the house despite its emptiness. Lights seen moving from window to window when the building has no electricity. A woman's figure seen hanging in the main hall window, reminiscent of Elena Lupescu's suicide. The sensation of being physically pushed away from the property when attempting to approach the front entrance. Cameras and electronic equipment malfunctioning or capturing unexplainable anomalies near the house. An unusually cold microclimate surrounding the property, even during Bucharest's hot summer months. Perhaps most disturbing are the accounts from the few urban explorers brave enough to venture inside. Those who have illegally entered the abandoned structure speak of disorientation so severe that familiar rooms seem to shift and rearrange themselves. Many report feeling followed by an unseen presence and hearing whispers in a language they cannot identify but instinctively understand as threatening. One explorer, who visited the house in the early 2000s and has since refused to return, described finding a room in the basement that did not appear on any architectural plans. A small chamber with walls covered in writing that appeared to be centuries older than the house itself. Before he could document this discovery, his camera battery drained instantaneously, and an overwhelming sense of panic forced him to flee the building. What could explain the persistent darkness that seems to cling to the house of the devil? Over the years, various theories have been proposed, ranging from the scientific to the supernatural. Some historians and archaeologists point to the land itself. There is evidence suggesting that before the house was built, the site may have been used for executions during the medieval period, creating the kind of tragic imprint that paranormal researchers call a residual haunting. Others suggest that the house's foundation may have disturbed an ancient burial ground, though archaeological evidence for this remains inconclusive. Geologists have noted that the area sits above an unusual geological formation that could potentially create electromagnetic anomalies, which some parapsychologists believe can trigger hallucinations or altered states of consciousness that are interpreted as supernatural experiences. Mental health professionals have pointed out that the house's reputation creates a powerful expectation effect. People approach the building already afraid, priming themselves to interpret ordinary stimuli, creaking wood, wind through broken windows, or the natural settling of an old structure, as evidence of the paranormal. However, these rational explanations do little to comfort those who have experienced the house firsthand. Many Bucharest residents, even those who consider themselves skeptical of supernatural claims, refuse to walk past the house after dark and will cross to the opposite side of the street when their path takes them near the ivy-covered facade. Romanian Orthodox priests have performed multiple blessings and exorcisms on the property over the decades, yet none seem to have diminished the reports of malevolent activity. In fact, one priest who participated in a blessing ceremony in the 1990s later told journalists that he sensed a darkness too deeply rooted to be cast out by prayer alone, something that predates our understanding of faith. Folklore experts note similarities between the legends surrounding Casa Diavolului and ancient Romanian myths about locations where the veil between worlds is thin. In traditional Romanian belief, certain places serve as portals through which entities from other realms can enter our world. These sites were traditionally marked and avoided, with elaborate rituals performed to keep malevolent forces contained. Following the fall of communism in 1989, the House of the Devil, like many nationalized properties in Romania, was returned to the descendants of its pre-war owners. However, these heirs, living abroad and well aware of the property's reputation, have shown little interest in reclaiming or renovating it. As a result, the house stands today much as it has for decades, abandoned, deteriorating, and almost completely engulfed by the ever-thickening ivy that has become its most recognizable feature. The windows remain boarded up, though boards are periodically replaced when urban explorers or thrill-seekers remove them to gain entry. The Romanian authorities have declared the building a historical landmark due to its architectural significance, preventing its demolition but providing little in the way of maintenance or restoration funds. Proposals to convert the property into a museum or tourist attraction have been met with resistance from both local residents, who fear disturbing whatever malevolence may reside there, and from preservationists, who believe the site should be handled with cultural sensitivity given its tragic history. Despite its official abandoned status, the House of the Devil has become an informal stop on Bucharest's growing paranormal tourism circuit. Tour guides specializing in dark Bucharest bring visitors to stand across the street from the ivy-covered mansion, recounting its grim history and alleged supernatural phenomena while carefully avoiding trespassing on the property itself. Paranormal investigation teams from around the world have requested permission to conduct formal studies of the site, though so far Romanian authorities have been reluctant to grant such access, citing safety concerns due to the building's structural deterioration. Local attitudes toward the house remain deeply divided. Older residents tend to treat the site with solemn respect, avoiding it entirely and discouraging conversations about its history. Younger Bucharest citizens often view it as an urban legend or dark tourist attraction, sometimes gathering near it on Halloween or during full moons in hopes of witnessing something unusual. Romania's post-communist embrace of its folklore and supernatural heritage has led to increased interest in sites like Casa Diavolului, Some scholars of Romanian cultural studies suggest that the house serves an important symbolic function in the national consciousness, a physical embodiment of the dark chapters of the country's history that cannot be erased or forgotten, but must be acknowledged and respected. Whether one views the House of the Devil as a site of genuine supernatural activity, a location whose tragic history has given rise to understandable superstition, or simply an architectural relic with an unusually dark past, its presence continues to cast a long shadow over General Prapogescu Street. The ivy-covered facade remains one of Bucharest's most recognizable and unsettling landmarks, a visual reminder that beneath the surface of even the most civilized cities, darker currents may flow. For those who believe in the supernatural, Casa Diavolului stands as evidence that some locations can serve as vessels for malevolence, trapping and amplifying the darkest aspects of human experience until they take on a life of their own. For skeptics, it represents the power of suggestion and the human tendency to create narratives that explain tragedy through supernatural frameworks. Regardless of one's perspective, one thing remains certain. The House of the Devil has earned its place in the pantheon of the world's most notorious haunted locations. Its ivy-covered walls containing secrets that continue to resist rational explanation. As shadows lengthen across General Prapogescu Street, the ivy-covered mansion stands as it has for generations, silent, watchful, and steeped in darkness, both historical and perhaps otherworldly. If you find yourself in Romania's capital, you might be tempted to seek out this infamous location. Should you choose to walk past the House of the Devil, perhaps you'll feel nothing more than a chill attributable to the natural microclimate created by its dense vegetation. Or perhaps you'll experience something more difficult to explain, a sudden heaviness in the air, an inexplicable sense of dread, or even a glimpse of something moving behind the boarded windows. Either way, the legends of Casa Diavolului remind us that some places become repositories for our deepest fears and darkest histories, physical locations where the boundary between the natural and supernatural worlds seems perilously thin. This has been the Haunted Lore Podcast. If you enjoyed this exploration of Bucharest's House of the Devil, please follow us on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review. Your support helps us continue to shine a light on the darkest corners of history and folklore. Until then, remember, not all legends are mere stories, and not all haunted places are willing to reveal their secrets. Some doors, once opened, cannot easily be closed again.